Rolling. So hello and welcome to today's session. We will be learning about the American Rescue Plan with a focus on the USDA debt relief for socially disadvantaged producers. Thank you for taking the time out and being here with us today. My name is Carrie Jo Lawrence, Executive Director of the Intertribal Agriculture Council, and I want to give a big thank you to our tribal partner organizations for their help in bringing today's webinar together. The Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, the National Congress of American Indians, the Native American Finance Officers Association, the National Association of Food Distribution Programs on Indian Reservations, and Native Food and Nutrition Resource Alliance. We are all working to improve information and access to resources, and they are all amazing partners, and we appreciate them so much. I'm going to hand it over to Erin Parker from IFAI to go over some housekeeping for today's webinar. So Erin.
Thank you so much, Carrie Jo, and thanks to all of our other tribal partners and to FSA for being here with us today. We're excited to be able to partner and co-host this with all of you. I am Erin Parker. I'm the Director of the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative here at the University of Arkansas School of Law. And I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping items before we get started, and then I'll introduce today's speaker. So just so you know, if you have a question today, and we hope that you do, attendees can ask questions in two ways. You can ask questions here in the chat using the Q&A feature via Zoom, and you can also ask on Facebook. We've got folks monitoring both the Q&A and the Facebook, so if you pop a question in there, please know that's the way to ask questions today. Today's recording will also be available soon on IAC's YouTube page, and we'll be sending the link out to all registered attendees. So if you're watching this later on the YouTube channel because you're registered but you couldn't make the live, congratulations, you found the stream. But know that if you have to jump off at some point, that video will be available later so you can catch up on anything that you missed. So with that housekeeping out of the way, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Zach Ducheneau, who is a citizen of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and the administrator for the USDA's Farm Service Agency. In Zach's role as FSA administrator, he is tasked with providing leadership and direction on agricultural policy, administering credit and loan programs, and managing conservation, commodity, disaster, and farm marketing programs through a national network of offices. Some of you may know Zach as the previous director of the Intertribal Agriculture Council, where he had been since the 1990s in various leadership positions. He's really spent his career educating people about the critical role of improving food systems, value-added agriculture, and foreign exports to respond to the enduring economic and social challenges of Native Americans and reservation communities. Zach also serves on the board of directors for Project Help, a nonprofit founded by his family to benefit the local community by providing life lessons and therapy through horsemanship, and operates his family's ranch on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation in north central South Dakota with his brothers. So with all of that said, I will hand it over to my friend and colleague, Zach Ducheneau. Zach.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, IAC, NCAI, all of the other groups. It's a pleasure to be here visiting with my friends in Indian country. And a couple of corrections there. I don't operate the ranch. They probably would tell you that there's precious little on the ranch that I even do anymore. So, but I've got the good fortune of being surrounded by a lot of folks here that make what I aspire to do professionally possible. So I always want to make sure I tip my hat to the crew here on the place, because without them, well, maybe it'd be good if we didn't have them, because then you wouldn't have to suffer through me for an hour. But such as it is, that's our reality today. You get to visit with me for an hour. And another correction that I like to make on the bio that's there is all of the things that Erin mentioned that I get to work on at the Farm Service Agency are nothing if we don't do something to do ag finance better than what we're doing. And that kind of brings us to the topic of conversation today, and that's the American Rescue Plan, which was signed into law by President Biden in March. And we're probably just about 2 months since that happened. And I know first and foremost on everybody's mind on this call, when are the loan payments going to happen? And we'll just set expectations right now. I can't tell you yet because we don't know for sure, because we don't know how far we can shorten it up. And we don't want to tell you something and then have to walk that back. So we're doing everything that we can inside the agency to get those loan payments out to producers as quickly as possible. I saw a message there. Was that for me? My voice is cutting in and out. Anybody else, or is that just Dean Joe?
I can hear you fine, Zach.
Okay, very good. All right, so here's what we know. In the American Rescue Plan, Section 1005 authorizes a payment of up to 120% of the outstanding indebtedness of a member of a socially disadvantaged group as of January 1st, 2021, provided they have a Farm Service Agency direct loan, a Farm Service Agency guaranteed loan, or a Commodity Credit Corporation direct farm storage facility loan administered by the Farm Service Agency. Now, the members of the socially disadvantaged groups are African American farmers, American Indian and Alaskan Native farmers, Asian American and Pacific Islanders, and Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. I might have missed somebody there, but this is more about Indian country right now, I think, than any of the other groups. Congress used the definition that you find in Section 2501 of the 7 CFR, and that definition expressly includes only those groups. Later acts of Congress, which do not apply here, have went on to include women, disabled people, veterans in those disadvantaged groups, but this is specific to the 2501 definition. As we take a look at the entirety of the direct loan portfolio, it looks like we're going to be around 15 to 18,000 producers all across the country meeting that designation. And it looks like we're going to be around $3.5 to $4 billion of loan payments that go out. Now, each of these categories of loan have their own different sets of circumstances that we have to work through. So I'll try to help you understand some of those circumstances so you can try to be empathetic about the time that it's taking for us to get this done, because I just a very short time ago would have been probably on the other side of the screen hollering at whoever's here saying, why don't you get the damn payment out the door? I understand a lot better why we can't now. Part of the reason is the way Congress wrote this particular legislation. When it says up to 120%, that gives the Secretary of Agriculture discretion to do something different than 120%. And when the Secretary has discretion, you have to explain that, how you exercise that discretion through a rulemaking or regulatory process. So that's the big challenge that we're faced with. But we'll talk just a little bit about FSA direct loans right now. These FSA direct loans range all the way from the micro loans to youth loans that are maybe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, all the way up to loans that have stayed on the books as a direct loan, even though the producer was foreclosed or voluntarily liquidated or something 2 decades ago. And they didn't apply for Keep Seagull, so they didn't get any debt forgiveness. So we've got a range of amounts from thousands to, in some cases, millions in this pool of FSA direct loan borrowers. The statutory loan limit for FSA direct loans right now is $600,000. So that's part of the decision process that we have to kind of work our way through. Where are we going to draw that line to try to get these payments out the door as quick as we can? some of these longer standing relationships may have been through a bankruptcy. They may be in an estate. They may be in currently in a liquidation. So those are all details that we've got to try to resolve, and we've got to try to do that in a way that it treats everybody as much the same as possible. So that's the FSA direct loans. Now we've got the FSA guaranteed loans, and in those loans, there's an entire other entity that we're dealing with. I can tell you that with regard to the FSA direct loans, the payment will be made on behalf of eligible borrowers to the FSA, and the balance, let's just use round numbers. If you had $100,000 balance as of January 1st, 2021, as an example, your 120% payment would be 120,000. 100,000 will go to the FSA, 20,000 will go to that borrower, directly to the borrower, not to the IRS or anything like that. Some have indicated they'd like to see that happen. We don't have the statutory authority to do anything but make a payment to the lender or the borrower. Let's jump back into the FSA guaranteed loans. So we've got a lender in this relationship now. Your local bank, maybe a regional bank, maybe even one of the big national banks. For whatever reason, and you've all heard my soapbox speech about commercial credit, they decided that they wouldn't enter into a relationship with the borrower unless the United States government decided to guarantee them 90% against any loss they may incur. So the relationship that the FSA has in that case is with that lender. The lender has a relationship with the borrower. So that's a whole different dynamic that we have to try to work our way through, and we're taking steps to resolve those processes. In considering the FSA guaranteed loan portfolio, many producers have an FSA guaranteed loan, but they also have an FSA direct loan. And some of them have an FSA guaranteed loan and maybe just a regular bank loan, or maybe a loan at one of the CDFIs. So there's a lot of nuance to each of these circumstances. And our job is to try to make sure that we do the best decision-making process we can so that everybody is kind of made whole in this process. The farm storage facility loans are handled directly by the FSA, so they function a lot like the FSA direct loans, except they come from the Commodity Credit Corporation, which for some reason has a cheaper cost of money, so the interest rate's usually lower. There's not an exceptional lot of those out there in Indian country or in the socially disadvantaged community. And I saw someone asked in the chat, they missed the number. We think we're around 15 to 18,000 borrowers that we're going to end up making a loan payment for. So why the 20% is a topic of conversation that comes up pretty often. Well, the idea that we understand from some of the discussions with the congressional staff is that they didn't want producers to come out of this with a big tax bill. So one of the efforts that we're undertaking within the agency is to try to engage with cooperators like the nonprofits that are on this call, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, Rural Coalition, to help you all prepare your borrowers who are going to receive this payment for any tax liabilities that may occur. There are federal taxes to be determined. Some states have income taxes or taxes on this type of payment that we want to make sure that our borrowers are getting the best advice. So we're working on building a series of cooperative agreements that will hopefully position our nonprofit organizations and others to help get the best advice we can to our producers. So you've heard me say loan payment or debt payment a lot. You haven't heard me say forgiveness or settlement or anything like that. There's a definite reason. The idea behind this particular piece of legislation is that it is different than a loan forgiveness, and it is different than a debt settlement. The United States government is making a payment on the behalf of the producer, so that producer will maintain their good standing with the Farm Service Agency, which means tomorrow you could come right back in the door and get another loan, buy that other piece of ground, pick up a few more pieces of machinery that you need, maybe go into that value-added agriculture endeavor that you've been thinking about. Because this is a loan payment, you preserve that relationship and that good standing with the agency. I'm going to talk a little bit about Section 1006, and then I would start to answer some questions. But what really gets me excited is Section 1006 of the American Rescue Plan. There is $1.010 billion in Section 1006. With that $1 billion, we can afford to develop a vision for what we think ag finance should look like. Should it look more like what the FSA does on a broader level? Should it look more like what our CDFIs are doing? Does what it needs to look like not exist at all? We have a chance through Section 1006 to engage with our partners and our stakeholder groups to build the future. Section 1006 is targeted specifically at socially disadvantaged borrowers. But in my estimation, if we can prove a model of ag finance that works better in our socially disadvantaged communities, we've done a lot towards rebuilding the entire system in a way that we can all have a more equitable share of this game. There are specific earmarks within Section 1006. And give me 1 second to pull that up, and I will talk with you just a little bit about what those are. It's jumping up here on my screen in a couple of seconds. Here. All right. So while that pulls up, if there are any questions that are burning in your brains, or are you going to moderate the questions, or do you guys want to ask them, or do you just want me to read them and answer them?
Zach, our plan was that I can go ahead and read off the questions to you as they pop up in the chat, and if you want to answer them. We do have a question for you to answer in the meantime while you're looking for that.
Yeah, let's bail in. I'm ready to roll.
Great. This one came via email, and it wanted to know about FSA participation loans from Danita Fisher. FSA participation loans, how they will be implemented, particularly pertaining to the 50% that is lended by a private lender.
That's a good question. And I'm going to have to get back to them with an answer. I hadn't really thought about that. But the way the statute reads, any indebtedness that is held either by a guaranteed lender or the Farm Service Agency that originates out of the Con Act would qualify. So if you'll email me that individual's email and their question, I'll get them an answer real quick. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll forward that. Our next question comes from Daniel Chatton, and he would like to know, he has a 2020 direct loan and would like to apply for a 2021 direct loan. However, his 2020 loan was due April 1st, so he's late. When he wants to, of course, know on the timeline of debt relief, as you've spoken to, but also since he's late on his 2020 direct loan, will he need to pay off that loan before he's able to get a 2021 direct loan.
So Daniel has a direct loan from 2020. Any balance that he had as of January 1st, 2021 will be paid on his behalf plus 20%. Unless Daniel is already at the maximum loan amount, which for a farm operating loan is 400,000, and for a farm ownership loan, which is a real estate loan, is 600,000. He can still come in and make an application for that. Now, if he is past due on a payment, that may adversely impact the review of that application. But once that account's settled, the application could go on forward.
Great. He would also like to ask that since he is a hemp farmer, he is a hemp farmer of 350 acres on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, and he would like to know if hemp is a qualifying crop for the QLA program and how that works towards 2020's QLA program as well.
Quality loss assistance, I don't believe hemp is in there, but let me just talk a little bit about hemp as it pertains to farm loans. It never occurred to me that I might get questions about anything beyond the American Rescue Plan program. Hemp is definitely not included in QLA because it wasn't even legal to grow when QLA was passed, as far as I know. But with regard to farm loans programs, because hemp has to have a license that is not transferable. So in order for this individual to grow hemp, they have to get a license. They can't transfer that license to the FSA in the event that we would have to capture collateral to recover our investment. Because of that non-transferability of that license, the entirety of a borrower's plan must be based on repayment on things other than hemp, and it must be secured by property other than what's growing the hemp. So it's not a real easy process right now for that until the regulations around hemp that aren't controlled by the FSA are loosened quite a bit. But I will get him an answer on the QLA for sure.
I was muted. Great, appreciate that. Our next question comes from Jed Bruger, who would like to know, why is this program not paying off 100% of the individual's debt and including another 20% for taxes? I believe you spoke a little bit to the taxes piece a second ago.
Why is it not?
Mm-hmm.
So it is, but I suspect that Jed might be asking about other debt. And that might be a question for our congressional delegations. All we can do is operate within the parameters that they set out. And Congress was very specific that this is Farm Service Agency direct loans, Farm Service Agency guaranteed loans, and farm storage facility loans.
Appreciate that clarification. Our next question is, will a subordination, oh, did you have a point?
John, but to Jed's point, in section 1006, remember that $1 billion is specifically contemplated for socially disadvantaged producers. That's $1 billion that the entire USDA gets to spend on improving economic prospects for socially disadvantaged borrowers. I've got those bookmarks up. I'm going to touch on that real quick, Julie, before we get to the next question.
Absolutely.
Not less than 5% of that $1 billion has to go to outreach, mediation, financial training, capacity building, cooperative development, all of the stuff that the nonprofits on the call really are already doing. But some of this money is earmarked for those type of activities. Not less than 5% of the total amount is to provide grants and loans to improve land access for socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners, including heirs property. Heirs property, to help everybody on the call understand, is sort of the equivalent of what we have with our fractionated interests. Black farmers have went through the same thing with the fractionation and control issues. So the heirs property is what they're talking about there. 5% of this money will go towards supplemental agriculture, research, education, and extension, as well as scholarships and programs to provide internships and pathways to federal employment. And then there's earmarks within that 5%. But supplemental is the key word. As we contemplate these things, remind your federal policymakers like me, this is supplemental. It shouldn't replace anything. It should add to it. And the last category of that 5% is to the 5% of that section 1006 money will go to provide assistance to socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, forest landowners that suffered related adverse actions or past discrimination or bias in Department of Agriculture programs as determined by the Secretary. So all borrowers that may have credit elsewhere that they have scratched and clawed to get their way to, we're going to be looking to you to say, hey, what would help your particular situation, and build some programs that will help all socially disadvantaged producers that may be out there, whether they're a borrower or not. Now, the question was, what was your last question, Julia?
The next one or the one that the same one?
The one that I rambled on instead of answering just now.
The question was, why is this program not paying off 100% of the individual's debt and including additional?
And we think about section 1006 as what we're going to use to try to build the system that catches everybody. Thank you. Go ahead for the next one.
Yep. The next one is, will a subordination loan for operating with a bank be covered?
No, but in a subordination loan, if the operating loan with the bank is guaranteed, then yes. But a subordination loan, just for those that may not have had one, the FSA makes you a loan. That puts them in first lien position on some of your assets. Oftentimes, in order to try to facilitate a relationship with a private creditor, FSA will take a position behind that commercial lender. So if we're in first position on your cows and tractors, we'll say, hey, First National Bank of Leather Seal, we will take a second position to you if you'll give them operating capital. That bank then has the opportunity to seek a guarantee on that loan, but if they didn't, that debt is not covered by this. But the loan that the FSA had to start with, wherein we subordinated our lien position, would be covered by this. Good question.
Our next question comes from Ashley Mann. Will the payoffs affect AGI? Ashley has read that this will be considered income.
This will be considered income for the purposes of federal income tax or state income tax if your state chooses to operate that way. With respect to AGI, that's a good question that I will have to get back to Ashley on. But my inclination is that it was the intention of Congress to have borrowers, have SDA borrowers come out the other side of this better than they went in. So I would think that there's probably some discretion in there as to whether this is considered part of your adjusted gross income for those purposes. But Julia, will you be cataloging these questions and get me the email address so I can get back to people?
I believe we can. As this is being recorded, I know that we can export the chat.
That would be fantastic.
Our next question comes and is, what about the subordination loans for operating with a bank will be covered? I think.
Yeah, that's basically the same question, and only if it's got a guarantee on it. Only if it's got an FSA guarantee will it be covered. And that's, again, the parameters that Congress put us in.
Our next question is from Stephanie Watson. Are there loan applications available for new Indigenous farming programs?
Absolutely. And we want you to come in the door. Generally speaking, we will finance nearly any ag endeavor, any ag production endeavor. Hemp is sticky. Marijuana we're not doing because it's not legal federally. But cows, potatoes, corn, beans, you name it, cotton. And there are 3 steps to qualifying for farm loan programs loans. The first is eligibility. Are you an eligible borrower? That means, do you have can you demonstrate the experience to operationalize the plan that you're submitting? The next is going to be repayment history. Do you have a history of making payments to your creditors when things are all within your control? If there's a disaster that wiped out your crop and you couldn't make payments for a year, we can work around that. But if it looks like you made your payments when things were within your control, we can get you in the door. And the third is, does your plan cash flow? And is it supported by realistic projections? Now, you might not be able to come in here and say, I've got a idea to raise the newest, best kind of grass-fed organic beef, and I'm going to sell it for $15 a pound. There's too many uncertainties there for us to take that $15 a pound as your production figure to calculate against your repayment. Your plan has to demonstrate the capacity for repayment of the loan as agreed to. So unless you've got a contract in your hand for that $15 a pound and a demonstrated history of producing the number of pounds you're saying you're going to, we have to look to the amount of live animal you can produce and what the purchase price is there. As luck would have it, our terms are really favorable. Our interest rates right now are 2.875, I believe, for real estate loans, and around 1.5% for those machinery and cattle loans. Yep, 2.875 and 1.5%. The farm ownership loans can go as long as 40 years. You have 40 years to repay that at 2.875%, and you're locked in at that rate at the beginning of your relationship. The farm operating loans have the maximum maturity is 7 years. So you have to have a plan to make your payment in full within 7 years. But that doesn't mean that it's got to just be 7 even payments. You can do an extended amortization. So your amortization would be set up as though you're going to pay that loan back over 15 or 20 years. You just have to have a plan to make that balloon payment or get refinanced at 7 years. Absolutely, get signed up, and we're looking for customers.
Great. Our next question comes from Terrence Gornio, who would like to know, will everyone who is foreclosed on via FSA guarantee through a preferred lender get a piece of the debt relief?
It depends on what the amount of indebtedness you had as of January 1st, 2021. If you were foreclosed on and liquidated in July of 2019, and you settled up your debt by selling your assets and paying the FSA off in full, Unfortunately, this program won't apply to you. And we've got to look to Section 1006 to build solutions that can help you improve your economic prosperity. If you are in foreclosure now, if you've got a notice of foreclosure, FSA stopped all of those things as soon as the Biden administration took over. We will not take any actions to accelerate debt, foreclose on any debt, liquidate any producers until such time as this is all resolved and we find out whether or not you're going to be eligible for the loan payments.
Appreciate that answer. Anita Matt would like to know that since this is for socially disadvantaged producers, has anyone looked at debts owed to commercial or other lenders if the producers are still Indian, or I assume other socially disadvantaged producers? Has any thought been given to assisting them with their debt?
Yes, a lot of thought has been given to assisting them with their debt. And with Section 1005, there is literally no legal way for the FSA to do that. But in Section 1006, we want to have your ideas on how to do something that works and improves outcomes for those folks as well. Anita, it's good to hear from you.
Our next question comes from Charlie Brocky, who says that he has been struggling with the idea of taking out a large ag loan for some years. With the amount of funding that is going to be available, have they considered continuing the debt relief for future loans?
Not the Section 1005 loan payment of 100 up to 120%. That doesn't mean we can't build a new system of ag finance with that $1 billion that we've got in Section 1006.
Great. Our next question is, if I have multiple direct loans, will all of my loans be eligible for this debt payment?
Yes, if you have multiple direct loans with the Farm Service Agency that all had a balance of indebtedness as of January 1st, 2021, those will all be paid.
Appreciate that clarification. Shannon Kennard would like to ask, you mentioned that borrowers, once debt is paid, will be able to still utilize FSA loan programs. If the goal was to encourage borrowers to graduate to private lenders, will I be able to utilize FSA loans as an SDA borrower and have access to borrow up to $600,000?
Yes. Now, philosophically speaking, as an individual citizen of the United States and not the Farm Service Agency administrator, I don't agree with graduating borrowers to predatory commercial credit. And that might be something that we take a look at in Section 1006. But yes, you would be able to come in and borrow up to $600,000, provided your plan showed that you had the prospects for repayment of that amount as agreed to, and had a purchase agreement for the real estate that you're trying to acquire.
Great, appreciate that answer. Our next question comes from Sean Grassel, who would like to know, what effect will the pending lawsuits against the loan payoff program of the American Rescue Plan have on the program?
That's a very good question, Sean, and it's good to hear from you as well. So one lawsuit has been filed by the Commissioner of Agriculture in the state of Texas, and he is alleging that German Americans, Irish Americans, Italian Americans, and other Americans of European ancestry have been socially disadvantaged at one point or another, and that they should be included in the socially disadvantaged definition. by referring to section 2501, Congress was contemplating well-documented disparate treatment of certain groups by the Department of Agriculture. And I don't think that there's been a point in history where the United States Department of Agriculture has ever been accused of discrimination by German Americans or Italian Americans until Mr. Miller and his lawsuit in Texas. So there's another lawsuit by some producers in Wisconsin, and they named me. So I was on the job for just over 2 months and was already sued. They're alleging that this is about skin color, and whether or not those will hold up any payments remain to be seen, what actions the court will take. I do know that we've got very highly skilled lawyers in the Office of General Counsel, and they've got equally skilled counterparts at the Department of Justice who have devoted their lives to defending the government from suits like this. So we're hopeful that the analysis that they've done going into this is as accurate as we think it's going to be.
Appreciate that description of the lawsuit. Our next question is that if you have a direct loan with the FSA and are an enrolled member of the tribe, but this question maker's husband is not an enrolled member, they are both listed on the application as borrowers, how will debt forgiveness be handled?
If that person has signed a promissory note that results in them having indebtedness as of January 1st, 2021, and that indebtedness meets one of those three categories, FSA direct, FSA guaranteed, or farm storage facility loans, their debt will be paid.
Good to know. Thank you. Our next question was answered previously. Our next question is a little bit longer, and looks like it might be a little bit of a comment, but it comes from an anonymous attendee who would like to state, we need to be able to provide easier access to capital for all ranchers. Ag finance is not working right now through FSA. We have put forward 6 loan applications in 2019 through 2020 and many different varieties to get help and still have not received any loan funds from FSA. The time and effort in doing these applications and answering hundreds of questions and then getting continual refusals for what we feel is red tape or determinations based on their location from the discretion of the loan officer makes them feel like the FSA FLP program is not really working and has been devastating for socially disadvantaged agriculture producers. We are beginning farmer ranchers utilizing outside technical assistance through who have been sent now to a 3rd loan officer because the others did not have the time or want to help. Our question is, how can we better be prepared to work with FSA and make them want to help us instead of just finding excuses to deny when commercial banks are continually refusing us to operate?
That's a very good question. And in the chat window, I have pasted a link to our handbooks. These are the tools that your loan officials will use to evaluate your loan application. If you have made an application and you receive an application complete notice, in order to deny you, the FSA has to spell out why we would deny you. If we deny that loan application and you clear up the things that we denied you based on, there is no way we can't loan you the money. I would offer you I'm going to go ahead and offer the services of the folks that are here on this call. IAC, IFAI, NCAI has some folks that specialize in this type of stuff. And the other groups that are here have technical assistance providers that will help you with that loan application so that they'll give you their read of the handbook and you will know going in what your prospects are. You may still get an incomplete application notice, but it won't be a list as long as your arm, odds are, and they can help expedite that process. But if you've had 6 loan applications in the last year and haven't been successful, 1, get some technical assistance, 2, do 1 more and let me know where you're applying so that I can find out what's going on. Yeah, use the technical assistance providers you got here. I think Lakota Funds might even be on the call. They do guaranteed loans. So there's a lot of opportunity out there to engage with nonprofits whose job is to help you get financing that fits you, maybe not just the finance that they offer.
That's very helpful. And yes, I know that NCAI, and I don't want to speak on behalf of IAC and IFAI, but I know that they wouldn't mind me seconding that they are here to help. That's the whole point of their existence, is to be here to help all of these producers in whatever ways we can. Our next question is from Justine Kugel. Can we develop a program to help with refinancing land notes that have higher interest rates through the banks? This would help a huge lump of producers by reducing interest rates and allowing more working capital through the year without hefty interest payments.
So that's a more than 1-part question. Yes, we can in section 1006, but we need to ask, why do we need to? FSA's direct farm ownership loan will not allow you to refinance existing debt. It's only for the purchase or the improvement of real estate or real property. That prohibition on refinancing comes from the United States Code, and it's one of the few parameters within which the FSA just can't deviate. We can't refinance existing debt with our direct farm ownership product. So we can look to section 1006 to build something that would help that.
Helpful, thank you. Our next question comes from Brinley Rowland, who says that they had a guaranteed loan approved contingent upon FSA guarantee prior to the January 1st deadline. However, due to COVID, FSA did not approve the guarantee until after January 1st. Are there any provisions for this FSA paperwork delay?
I can ask the OGC about that particular case, but based on what I know of the law, you had to have actually incurred the indebtedness by January 1st, 2021. I know that's not the answer that we'd like to hear. We'd like to be able to help everybody out equally, but we can only operate within what Congress let us do.
We'll have that question marked for you if you'd like to follow up with Brinley.
Please.
Our next question is, if a loan was approved in November of 2020 but not closed until January 5th, it's along the same lines. Due to COVID regulations, will it still be covered?
If the loan didn't have any indebtedness as of January 1st, 2021, there's no indebtedness for us to target with a loan payment. So unfortunately, that one does not meet the requirements. But on that loan, let's talk about those loans that don't qualify for a second. Due to the pandemic, there is a disaster set-aside program in effect that will allow you to take any payments that you have coming due between now and I think September 2021 and move them to the back end of the note. That would let you not make that payment and use that production income to help insulate your operation from further economic hardship. So that's part two of that answer.
Appreciate that. Our next question comes from Tawny Brunch, who would like to have a little more insight on the 1006 B3, quote, to support the development of agricultural credit institutions that are designed to serve socially disadvantaged groups, including other financing institutions funded by the Farm Credit System. And could parts 1006 B1 and 2 be used to support that work?
1003. She might be looking at a different version of what I got, but the short answer is yes, we can build this into whatever we think it needs to be. And I know from firsthand experience, you working with some borrowers previous to coming here, the farm credit institutions have too narrow of sideboards for us to get into most of the time. Some of the most qualified borrowers that we worked with in Indian country had 3 or 4 applications turned down by farm credit institutions. So what they're doing may not be the answer unless we take a look at broadening their scope of authority and to who they could work with. But yeah, Tawny, there's really no, our imagination and our will to do it is our limit in section 1006.
Great. Our next question comes from Brian Lafferty, who would like to know what forms will need to be filled out if they were unable to make their December 31st payment and then they redid their loan with FSA. Is it their new loan or their old loan of 2020?
That's a tough one to answer. So the only form that a producer needs to worry about in this relationship with regard to section 1005 loan payments is AD 2047. And I can even put a link to that in the thing here, I think. But it's the AD 2047. And that form is a voluntary form wherein you can designate your race or ethnicity or gender as part of a customer data set. And that is the primary form that we're using to make the determination. Now, if you're uncertain, if you have a FSA direct loan, guaranteed loan, or a farm storage facility loan, and you're uncertain if that designation has been made, you can call your local office. You can click that little blue link in that chat window, fill that out, sign it, send it to your local loan official, send it to your state loan official, send it to your nonprofit to help get it to the right place, or send the damn thing to me if you want, and I'll make sure it gets to the right place. But let's make sure we get our designations updated if we're in doubt at all. In some cases, there are offices where it might have served you better to not declare your ancestry or your heritage going in there. That's the reality that we live with. Now it's in your interest to do that. So we're hopefully moving the FSA past a history of discriminatory practices.
On a similar line, our next question is, how will FSA identify socially disadvantaged producers? Initial AD 2047 at the time of application, self-identifying as native, or will there be a new window to self-identify with updated AD 2047?
And you can absolutely download an AD 2047 today and fill that out and send it in. And you will still qualify because you were a socially disadvantaged borrower prior to January 1st, 2021. That doesn't have a deadline date on it, just the debt.
Appreciate that. And looking at the clock, it looks like we just have a few minutes left. So we just have time for one more question. I will assure all of the attendees that, like I said, we are recording this and we do have the chat, both the Q&A and the chat will be exported, and any of those additional questions, we'll send them over to Zach at FSA. Our final question is under section 1006, can tribes seek technical assistance on GIS and land inventory of tribal lands? I believe there is a gap between the BIA and the USDA that needs to be addressed in concerning what land status is in regards to USDA programs.
I believe you could, but I'm going to put on my tribal member hat now. Why don't we insist that the government do that as part of its trust obligation instead of seeking that 1006 money? I know we've got a great opportunity. I'm putting my government official hat back on right now. I know we've got a great opportunity to do some cross-departmental work with the Secretary of Interior now, because our Secretary of Interior, in her discretion, can do a lot of the things that we need the Secretary of Interior to do that they wouldn't do previously, because they weren't connected to our issues the way Secretary Holland will be. So I would say let's respectfully ask the federal government to coordinate amongst its various departments to fulfill that trust obligation for Indian producers.
Appreciate that response and appreciate you being here and answering all these questions for us. Do you have anything left to say, Carrie Jo or Zach?
Zach, yeah, do you have anything else you want to close out with?
Yeah, I get it. I know what the FSA has been and done, and I make a habit of letting everybody in the department know the USDA is wearing a black eye because of the behavior of the Farm Service Agency. Nobody ever filed a discrimination lawsuit against RMA or APHIS. It's been the Farm Service Agency or the Farmers Home Administration. You have my commitment to make that better in the next few years. And you've got the support of Secretary Vilsack and the support of President Biden and Vice President Harris to address that. The commitment to equity here is like none that's ever been seen before. And we are going to, by gosh, do better, or they're going to drag me out of that damn building.
Awesome. That's a perfect way to end it. Thank you for those words, Administrator Ducheneau. And thank you, everybody. That's all the time we have for today. And thank you for joining us and submitting your questions. We will send out the full recording of the webinar very soon. Each of the registered attendees will get an email. So keep your eye out for that. And we hope to see you soon at our next webinar. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. I appreciate